I know I've been out on a little island here all by myself, Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio, about these Raptors. And what we saw last night, is that a product that the Raptors are pretty good and we don't give them enough credit? Or is this a product that the Warriors had been off for 9 days and just looked a little disinterested in Game 1?
Both. How about that? How about I take the easy way out?
Little something on both sides.
Well, I picked Toronto to win Game 1, but if you were to ask me, who was going to support Kawhi, and Kawhi didn't play a great game at all, not close to it. I didn't think Siakam could score 32 points in a finals game. I thought he might be in the 20s. He was obviously a difference maker. Gasol, they had several guys really contribute big time. Gasol, Van Vliet, even Danny Green made some baskets. So when they played like that, they're a very good team. And the other thing is, it's not just the Golden State being off for 9 days, because usually you take a half and that gets the rust off. It's the 17 turnovers. We know that's always been their bugaboo. They turn the ball over. And without Durant, they don't have a lot of great size in terms of a last line of defense. So points in the paint, Toronto excelled. That's where Siakam killed them. So, and the other thing I looked at too, this was a great performance for a team that had never been in the finals. Yes, some of their players had been in the finals, but as a team. And so that's always important because confidence-wise, that's a lot different than losing your opener and then the pressure's really on just to get a split. So I give them a lot of credit, Toronto. And, Golden State can play a whole lot better. That's the whole thing. When I was watching that game last night and they're hanging around and they weren't getting blown out and they weren't playing that well, that's where I said to myself, you know what? They're just okay here. They could play a lot better. And Toronto had better watch out because we'll have to see how they deal with that in a Game 2. It should be a lot closer, and we'll see how Toronto deals with some prosperity here.
Yeah, Mitch, it would get down to like 7, and you'd be like, all right, here they come, and this Toronto team, the Toronto team we saw in years past, they were going to wilt. It never happened. They just kept, holding them off. And there's a couple of guys you mentioned. Gasol, we talked about it yesterday. I think he's a big problem in this. The Sixers, he gave the Sixers problems when he kept, bouncing out. They didn't defend him on the perimeter very well. Milwaukee had problems with them, but he wasn't a big scorer in those series. But last night, if he's going to score 20 because Golden State's not going to close out on him, and he plays like that, I think that made that game last night very interesting, but could make the series interesting if they're going to defend. Now, I would assume they're going to adjust a little bit and not give him wide open looks all night.
Well, the first thing they have to do is what they did to Kawhi Leonard, which was send multiple people at him, get the ball out of his hands, which is the smart thing to do. And then hopefully, from their standpoint, they're thinking they can get, do a better job on Gasol. Maybe he won't be as effective. It seems like Van Vliet has been a different player since his significant other gave birth to Fred Jr., and he's been kind of walking on air and riding that whole emotional thing, and he looks great. And, what are the chances Siakam goes for 32 again? I just don't see that. My big takeaway for Golden State was everybody talks about Draymond Green and these triple doubles. He got torched last night in a lot of matchups against Siakam. Plus, he had 6 turnovers. So they got to put, their number one. I'm sure their number one priority isn't Gasol. It isn't Van Vliet. It's all right. How are we going to deal with Siakam now? And for Golden State, the other thing is that things are going to change when Durant comes back. It looks like it's going to be Game 4. Don't rule out Game 3 in Oakland. And that obviously, now we know he's going to be off a month, Mike, but obviously when he comes back, that's going to put a whole lot more pressure on Toronto's defense because they just can't hone in on Curry, who's a handful, and Klay Thompson. Now you have a guy who's a 2-time Finals MVP. He could be, I don't think he'll win the Finals MVP. We'll see. He's coming in at a disadvantage, not playing maybe the first 2 games, but there have only been 2 players in the history of the league who have won 3 straight Finals MVPs, Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal. So that's the type of player we're looking at. And, Nick Nurse and his staff do not want to see Kevin Durant, but there will be a point where he is going to come back, and that's going to change the series.
Well, that too. And, of course, last night you saw Boogie Cousins. He didn't bring much to the table, looked a little out of shape and slow. But we'll see, keep an eye on when Durant comes back for them and how that changes things. Because last night, I'll tell you, one of the things we talked about, too, was this Raptors team, and I think it was been the whole playoffs. It's like, they only have Kawhi. There's not a whole heck. But they play phenomenal defense. Those other guys are very good defensive players. And I don't think the Warriors have seen defense. Like the Rockets play no defense. And Portland doesn't have the length, defensively. I thought the defense last night of the Raptors was a big reason why they struggled.
Well, you're right. Plus, this is the best defense Golden State's played because they started out, don't forget, with the Clippers. And so Toronto does have a lot of length and size, and they've got some athletes. And here's the thing that I also took away. Golden State got torched, gave up 118 points, over 50% shooting. They're better defense than that. And I think that's what the Raptors are going to find out too. But a lot of it has to do with, who's manning the back line. When Kevin Durant's back there and he's 6'11", and he does a great job, even though he's known as an offensive player, they're a much different team and a much better team. So obviously they've got to hold the fort without him here, Sunday and win and get this split. They don't want to go home to Oakland down 0-2. But, everybody, I know people in Toronto are going crazy thinking they've won the series, but it's only 1-0.
Right.
They've got to sustain, and that Golden State's going to come back with a whole lot more focus. No more rust excuses there, and they're going to get great production. I think the guy to watch is Draymond Green, who had his little thing with Drake after the game, left the court angry. I think he'll carry that over and play with a good edge, anger in Game 2.
Well, and you have all that, and how many games in these playoffs, the Game 1 team, Orlando beat Toronto, and it raised eyebrows, and Boston beat the Bucks, and the Bucks beat the Raptors twice. The Sixers lost to the Nets, and it was like, whoa, this is wrong, and that's wrong. And it seems that there's been a lot of impactful Game 1 losses, and everybody goes crazy. And then those series have played out in different ways. So obviously the Warriors can get back, and many people think can win 4 straight here.
Well, we'll see. I don't know if they can do that. I picked them in 6. I think the thing, when people are going crazy in Toronto, it's because, let's face it, 24 years in the NBA, and they finally made the breakthrough. They're finally in their finals, so everybody up there is, thinking that this is the year. And the Warriors look like they're susceptible. They're definitely more vulnerable than they've been with Kevin Durant. I mean, if Kevin Durant starts this series, that's probably a 5-game series. People are saying, well, this Kawhi team with Toronto is better than the Cleveland teams. That's nonsense. When LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love were on the floor playing well for Cleveland, they're better than this Toronto team. Reason number one, Mike, is because LeBron James. So that's the type of stuff you're getting out of
I
Toronto.
agree with you there. I think they were better than
all this crazy hype.
I think they're.
And now, we'll see if these other guys produce like Siakam, like Gasol, like Fred VanVleet, if they can do it game in and game out. I mean, that's the test of a champion. You're not going to win a championship just trying to ride the coattails of Kawhi Leonard, who frankly is he's an outstanding player. He ain't LeBron James when LeBron James beat this team in 2016, coming back from a 3-1 deficit. He ain't close.
No, well, I think you're right about that, Mitch. This Toronto team is not as good as that Cleveland team that had Kyrie, and Love playing at his best, but it's better than the Cleveland team last year,
Well, yeah. Oh, of course. I mean, these Cleveland teams, don't forget, they were what? They won 1 game. They were 1-8. And they're lucky they didn't get swept that first year, Durant's first year, where Golden State had a chance to be the first team ever to run the table and go 16-0. And so, they won a game when they were, down 3-0. And then last year was after that Game 1 debacle with the J.R. Smith thing, and they changed the call on LeBron on the video replay. That was the end of the series there. So, yeah, I mean, they're a better team. But the idea that this is the best team Golden State has faced in a finals is absurd.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM, NBA Radio. Now, I thought, too, Curry had a big game last night, but I thought they really made him work hard. I mean, VanVleet has been excellent on him. That's been an interesting story because who thought VanVleet was some, lockdown defender? But I thought Curry was running and had some, his numbers at the end of the night were great, but can he keep that up over a series, having to put out as much energy as he had to last night?
I think he can. The one thing that's not on his resume, and we always remind him of it, is the Finals MVP. And I think that's the only thing that's missing. Obviously, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, is the greatest shooter in the history of the game. What teams want to do with him, obviously, and we've seen it, what Cleveland has done in the past with him in the finals, is try to wear him out, try to play physical with him, try to get under his skin, put physical defenders against him. And so I thought coming into this series, he had been done such a great job carrying, as he did, what he did in the Portland series, what he obviously did to close out the last game, plus the 14 minutes where they didn't have Durant against Houston. He just took his game to a level that we hadn't seen him play since he won since he won the MVP in the regular season a couple of years ago. Why? Because Kevin Durant basically came in and took his role as the number one guy. And I think a lot of people, they look at Steph Curry and they got to remember this guy was the only unanimous MVP winner. Like I said, everybody acknowledges him now, Mike, as the greatest shooter in the game. And basically, he's been relegated to the number two role. He's really done a great job sacrificing, which he doesn't get enough credit for. It's even better than what Dwayne Wade did when they got LeBron, because Dwayne Wade was not at all what Curry was. And so now Curry has a chance. I thought going into this finals, he had a great chance to win the finals MVP, as long as obviously Golden State had to win. They don't give it to losing players anymore. Had only done that once. And I figured he would continue on his hot streak. So he put up numbers last night, but, let's face it. They really weren't this was always a 6-7 point game. And like you said, Toronto did a great job throwing all their rallies, but they haven't gotten rid of Steph Curry yet.
Mitch, what about if Iguodala is not the Iguodala that was, the guy won a finals MVP because of his defense. He had the MRI. They said it looks okay, but if he's not himself, how does that change this series?
Changed it a lot. First of all, they don't have a lot of depth as it is with their guys. Obviously, without Durant, DeMarcus Cousins, who didn't show me much last night. You're right, conditioning-wise and stuff. He hadn't played since Game 2 of the Clippers first round. And Iguodala is such an important part of that team at both ends. You saw he makes. It's one thing. This Golden State team, one of the reasons that they've been winning these championships is that if they're in close games, whether it's in the finals or Mike or in the conference finals, whatever, they got guys who step up and make in the last 2 minutes, make a big steal, make a big block, make a big basket, right? Get a turnover for him. And we saw what Iguodala did when he stripped Lillard in the Portland series. I think it was to close out Game 2. So if he's limited, that is a huge concern for Steve Kerr, because Steve Kerr considers him one of the highest IQ players he ever coached. He considers him like a Pippen type when it comes to that. And he has an impact at both ends, especially with games on the line. So, this is looks like it's almost like a war of attrition now. As soon as he came up limping last night, I said, oh, this is a bad sign. You mentioned the MRI is clear, whatever that means. They're not going to announce if he was bad anyway.
Right.
But the proof is going to be they're thankful now they got another day off, and then we'll see how he is Sunday. If he's limited, that's bad for Golden State.
Yeah, and you mentioned Danny Green. I mean, he had 3 threes last night, which he hadn't made a shot since, my gosh, maybe the first round, it seems like.
He hadn't made a shot since San Antonio.
Right, exactly.
What it seemed like. It's like Fred VanVleet didn't make a shot since Wichita State. I mean, and Danny Green, they love his defense, but he's got to be out there making shots. And when he's making threes, I mean, they made one more three, I think it was, than Golden State last night. You're ahead of the game. So, yeah, Danny Green is a big-time player. Nick Nurse, who's an inexperienced coach when it comes to the finals, he can only draw finals experience from obviously Kawhi as a finals MVP, and Danny Green, who in that crazy series where the Ray Allen shot beat San Antonio in Game 6 and they lost Game 7, Danny Green was a few minutes maybe away. He made a ton of threes, I think, in that series. A lot of people were thinking he's a finals MVP. He's got a lot of experience, so he needs to obviously – all their supporting guys need to play well because, Mike, when it comes down to it, Golden State's best players – give them the advantage, even though they don't have home court. And that's where, when they get the ramp back, that's their real advantage.
I'll tell you what, though, here in Philly, this reminds me a lot of the Iverson team with Kawhi as the front runner, and then everybody else is very defensive-minded, but they have better offensive pieces in that Sixers team. The Sixers won that game on the road in L.A., but Toronto has home court advantage. People forget that.
Let me tell you something. I covered the Lakers that entire Western Conference Finals, and I didn't think there was any way they weren't going to sweep the Sixers. So, Game 1, you rolled around, it was like, hey, Mitch, what are you talking about? So, the other thing, too, is there you're playing a Laker team that, as people want to talk about how great this Golden State team is. That Laker team, that was the beginning of their three-peat, and that's where you had Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant at their, all-time powers. And I rate that team. I'm a little biased. I say that's a better team than this Golden State team. Now, they didn't win. They've won 4 titles, I think, in 5 years, the Lakers. Or actually, they lost. They won the 3, right?
Yes.
So even though they came up short at the end against Detroit, when you got Shaquille O'Neal, who's he was just a physical, we know what kind of a force he was. And Kobe Bryant, I'm rating those guys and their team above this team. So bottom line is the Sixers had a tougher task than Toronto was facing.
Yeah, Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM, NBA Radio, Sporting News, Forbes, longtime NBA columnist here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. He's appearing for the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. It's interesting. I know nobody can get into the head of Kawhi Leonard, but it's almost like we were hypothesizing earlier, like Kawhi wins this series. It's like mission accomplished. I'm out of here. Or is it, man, I got unfinished business. I was close, and this team can win. I come back here. It's almost like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But Kawhi has so much in the future of this league in the palm of his hand right now.
Well, yeah, but the free agency really starts with Durant. Because you know what, I mean, if he leaves Golden State, that knocks them down a peg. Now Kawhi,
let me go back to Durant. If they lost, does that make Durant say, "See, you need me here, I'm staying"? Just
Well, he's hard to read too. I mean, what it does do is historically, it's going to knock them down also because then their finals record without Durant's going to be 1-2, right?
Yes. Yep.
So that's going to be something there that's going to be that's a hit for them. I've been of the opinion, even though Kawhi doesn't say anything, that he's going to go out and he's going to be a Clipper. Clippers just got fined today, by the way. Doc Rivers got fined for tampering because he went on TV the other day and talked about how this guy's the closest thing we have to Michael Jordan, but which may be true. But in terms of Kawhi, I don't think this series for him sways him one way or the other. I think that he's going to be a Clipper. I'm not rooting for that. I'd love to see Toronto keep him, but I think you have to look at it this way. If he wants to stay long term, meaning 5 years, what does he think that roster is going to look like after a couple of years? Lowry's older, Ibaka's older. How good is Siakam going to be? Who's his number two? Who's his wingman going to be? Mm-hmm. He can go to the Clippers and they can go get another big-time player. They can go get Durant. I don't know who they can land, but I think they're going to have the possibility, it looks like, more than a possibility if they make a move, they can get two max players. And he's from Southern California originally. So now I was wrong about Paul George. But, Paul George was interesting. When I mentioned that, people say you're wrong. I go, yeah, well, what did I draw on? I draw on the fact that before he got to Oklahoma City, even, he had been in Indiana for years, and all he told people was he wanted to play for one team, the Lakers. So that's all we had to draw on was he wanted to play for the Lakers. Okay, so he ended up staying in Oklahoma City. I think this is different. But I really do think it's going to come down to Kawhi going back home and looking at the Toronto roster and saying, this might be the only time I get to a finals with this team.
We're talking with Mitch Lawrence, obviously the Game 2 Sunday night, which, hey, you mentioned it. Kawhi did not have his best game. He only had 5 field goals in the game. But I feel like, see if you agree, Toronto almost has to go up 2-0. The Warriors could go down 2-0 and still win this series, I think. But if it's 1-1, I think Toronto's in trouble.
Well, they are. That's why they always have to, the home court is so big, especially for a team in its first finals, even with guys with experience, like I've said. You never count Golden State out, especially we know that Durant, now he has to go through a full practice, which will probably happen between games 3 and 4, okay? But once they get him back, and we'll see how limited he is, but when he gets back, he'll probably be ready. I mean, that totally changed. To me, that's going to change the series. I mean, now you're Nick Nurse and how are you going to stop Durant and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson? It goes back to that old thing where, okay, Durant might not be 100%. He's going to have to work off some rust. But, Mike, when Kevin Durant plays with the Warriors, it's kind of like, they're the best team, right? And Toronto all of a sudden ain't going to look that good. That's why they got to win as many games as they can without Kevin Durant there, because when he comes back, that's the problem.
Yeah, it's like the whole conversation you and I would have from time to time during the course of the year with Kyrie. It's like the Celtics need Kyrie because in these big games, you got to have that guy. And Draymond said it the other day to Rachel Nichols. He said, I push the pace more without him, but when we don't run a play right and the shot clock's winding down, it's nice to have him to throw the ball to.
Well, you throw the ball to Durant, and a couple of things can happen. He can score from anywhere on the court, right? Or he'll get to the foul line.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest reasons they got him originally was in that series where they lost the 3-1 series lead against Cleveland and Draymond got suspended, and then they went down, and they lost 5-6-7. They didn't get to the foul line a lot in fourth quarters of those losses, the last 3 losses. They were one shot and out, no offensive rebounds, nobody was getting free throw line. And their hierarchy, including Jerry West was there as an advisor, the big thing was we needed a guy like Durant who can get us a basket late or stop the game, stop the flow, and get to the free throw line. Because at that time, he was better and more adept at getting calls than Curry. And so that's the thing. That's what Draymond Green's talking about. There's a lot. When Kevin Durant is on the court, there's a lot of great stuff that happens for you as an offensive team. And that's what's going to – I mean, we're going to see when he comes back. I'm fascinated to see if they'll throw him out there if they're down 0-2 for Game 3, because then, you really need him. But there's no doubt he's going to play. The big question is going to be how, is he limited? What can he do? How efficient he is? He's been off for basically, a month? Is it going to be 27, 28 days and all that? Is he going to be diminished? I don't know. I have a feeling we'll probably see a really good version of Kevin Durant. Maybe not a Finals MVP version, but a guy who can still get them 4 wins.
Hey, I'll tell you, and I know a lot of people get on me for it. A lot of listeners text in when I say it. I've got LeBron, Kawhi, KD. They're my 3. Curry just a step below them because of what you just said. That KD, he can get you from almost anywhere. Curry can too, but not the same way. The 6'3" height against a 7-foot guy is a lot different when you're trying to create a shot.
Oh, he's got basically, the most unblockable shot in the history of the sport was Kareem with the sky hook. That was and it stands to reason. The guy's the number 1 scorer of all time. I'll tell you what, Kevin Durant, you can't block his shot. And if you noticed last night, Kawhi going to the basket, he had trouble, and he didn't get a shot off. He had a shot blocked. Now, I flip-flop with you. I put LeBron still 1, although, you know what, he's showing he's a little more susceptible, and there are nights where I think Durant's better, but I'm putting Durant above Kawhi.
Well, I didn't give you – by the way, that was no particular order. I just put those 3. They're my 3 in the top. LeBron's probably 1, KD, Kawhi, right. I don't know. But I don't include Curry with those other 3. I think he's almost in his own category there by himself. I don't know if there's anybody else with him in that next category.
But I'll tell you what, if we had a shooting contest, you put those 4 guys on the court, Curry's beating everybody.
Curry's winning. Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM, NBA Radio, Forbes, Sporting News, NBA columnist. And, of course, he was kind enough to join us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline to talk NBA Finals Game 2, Sunday night, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thank you, Mitch. Appreciate it, pal.
Enjoy the weekend. Thanks, Mike.
Always good. Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM, NBA Radio.